Now, House of Cards, creatively, actually follows the model more often employed here in Great Britain. The television industry here has never really embraced the pilot season looked to by the networks in the United States as a worthwhile effort. And now look, of course, we went out to all the major networks with House of Cards, and every single one was interested in the idea, but every single one wanted us to do a pilot first. And look, it wasn't out of arrogance that David Fincher and Beau Willimon and I were not interested in having to audition the idea. It was that we wanted to start to tell a story that would take a long time to tell. We were creating a sophisticated, multi-layered story with complex characters who would reveal themselves over time, and relationships that would need space to play out. And the obligation, of course, of doing a pilot, from the writing perspective, is that you have to spend about 45 minutes establishing all the characters and create arbitrary cliffhangers and basically generally prove that what you're setting out to do is going to work. Netflix was the only network that said, we believe in you. We've run our data, and it tells us that our audience would watch the series. We don't need you to do a pilot. How many do you want to do? And we were like, 2 seasons? Now, by comparison, last year, 113 pilots were made. 35 of those were chosen to go to air. 13 of those were renewed, but most of those are gone now. And this year, 146 pilots were shot. 56 have gone to series, but we don't know the outcome of those yet. But the cost of these pilots was somewhere between $300 and $400 million a year. That makes our House of Cards deal for 2 seasons look really cost effective. I know you're here, Netflix. I know you're here. Now, clearly the success of the Netflix model, releasing the entire season of House of Cards at once, proved one thing. The audience wants the control. They want the freedom. If they want to binge, as they've been doing on House of Cards and lots of other shows, then we should let them binge. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have stopped me on the street and said, thanks, you sucked 3 days out of my life. And through this new form of distribution, we have demonstrated that we have learned the lesson that the music industry didn't learn. Give people what they want, when they want it, in the form they want it in, at a reasonable price, and they'll more likely pay for it rather than steal it. Well, some will still steal it, but I think we can take a bite out of piracy. All right, so we get what the audiences want. They want quality. We get what the talent wants, artistic freedom. And the only way to protect talent and the quality of our work is to be innovative. And we also get what the corporations want, what the studios want, what the networks want. They want to make money. And we need them to be profitable so that they can continue to fund high-quality production. They want the highest possible audiences with the greatest impact. We get it. We all get it. The challenge is, can we create an environment where executives who live in data and numbers are emboldened and empowered to support our mission? To have an environment that leadership will take risks, willing to experiment, be prepared to fail, aiming higher rather than playing it safe. It's like Steve Jobs. Why did he continually cite Henry Ford as an inspiration? Because Ford anticipated that people didn't know that they needed or wanted a car until he invented one. And we didn't know that we needed and wanted all that Apple has brought our lives until Steve Jobs put it in our laps or put it in our hands. We need to be that innovative. And in some ways, we need to be better than the audience. We need to surprise, break boundaries, and take viewers to new places. We need to give them better and better quality. We might not disrupt the status quo overnight, but we can mold structures at the center of our businesses, because if we really, truly put talent at the heart of everything we do, we might just be able to have greater highs across a broader spectrum of this industry. That's what I believe. It takes every artistic medium a number of decades to find its footing and to find its being recognized as a legitimate art form. Novels weren't taken seriously at first because they weren't poetry. Photography was seen as inferior to painting for its first 50 years. It took decades for film to graduate from cheap Nickelodeon entertainment for the masses to something considered a fine art form. Buster Keaton is now seen as a genius, but at the time was a vaudevillian clown in the flickers. And as for David Lean, no one paid any attention to his warning in 1990. No one took him seriously that night. The film industry didn't believe that television could ever become its biggest competitor. And yet, it would only be 8 years later that The Sopranos would debut on HBO. And the tide of actors, writers, directors, and producers seeking and finding a more fertile playground than the film industry was offering them would begin. And I do not think that anyone today, 15 years later, in terms of character-driven drama, can argue that television has not indeed taken over. So it's really only in the last 15 years that television has finally been seen as a legitimate art form, mostly because these pioneers in cable took chances, and those stories found audiences thirsting for more sophisticated narratives and characters than the movie theaters were offering them. And the warp speed of technological advancement, the internet, streaming, multi-platforming, happens to have coincided with the recognition of television as an art form. So you have this incredible confluence of a medium just coming into its own as technology for that medium is drastically shifting. Studios and networks who ignore either shift, whether the increasing sophistication of storytelling or the constantly shifting sands of technological advancement, will be left behind. And if they fail to hear these warnings, audiences will evolve faster than they will, and they will seek out stories and content providers who give them what they demand. Complex, smart stories available whenever they want, on whatever device they want, wherever they want. Netflix and other similar services have succeeded because they have married good content with forward-thinking approach to viewing habits and appetites. And the risk at this juncture is becoming too institutionalized, too schematic, thinking that something that's working now will work a year from now. The curse of success is that the stakes get higher. Careers are made, salaries increase, people have reputations and track records to protect. And the end result is a shift toward conservatism, away from risk-taking. And if there's one thing that overlaps between business and art, it's that in the long run, the risk-takers are rewarded. And one way that our industry might fail to adapt to the continually shifting sands is to keep a dogmatic differentiation in their minds between the various media, separating film, TV, miniseries, webisodes, or however you want to label these narrative formats. It's like when I'm working in front of a camera, that camera doesn't know it's a film camera or a TV camera or a streaming camera, it's just a camera. So I predict that in the next decade or two, any differentiation between these platforms will fall away. Is 13 hours watched as one cinematic whole really any different than a film? Do we define film as being something 2 hours or less? Surely it goes deeper than that. If you're watching a film on your television, is it no longer a film because you're not watching it in a theater? If you watch a TV show on your iPad, is it no longer a TV show? The device and the length are irrelevant. The labels are useless, except perhaps to agents and managers and lawyers who use these labels to conduct business deals. But for kids growing up now, there's no difference. Watching Avatar on an iPad or watching YouTube on a TV or watching Game of Thrones on their computer. It's all content. It's just story. To say nothing of the audience's attention span. I mean, for years, particularly with the advent of the internet, there's people griping about, lessening attention spans. But if someone can watch an entire season of a TV series in one day, doesn't that show an incredible attention span? Because when the story is good enough, people can watch something 3 times the length of an opera. What'd you do last weekend? Now, 15 years ago, I might not have been up here talking to you about this because television was considered a lost cause. Oh, frankly, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been up here lecturing you because my agent would have never allowed me to do a TV series after winning an Oscar, let alone something streaming. And to an unheard of degree, we are finally free from that hoary old shadow cast over television since its inception, the shadow of ratings. Not one of us in this room will ever see a 30 share in our lifetimes, and it's a wonderful, freeing thing. Netflix did it right and focused on the things that have replaced the dumb, raw numbers of the Nielsen world. They embraced targeted marketing and brand as a virtue higher than ratings. And the audience has spoken. They want stories. They're dying for them. They're rooting for us to give them the right thing. And they will talk about it, binge on it, carry it with them on the bus and to the hairdresser, force it on their friends, tweet, blog, Facebook, make fan pages, silly GIFs, and God knows what else about it. Engage with it with a passion and an intimacy that a blockbuster movie could only dream of. And all we have to do is give it to them. The prize fruit is right there, shinier and juicier than it's ever been before. So it will be all the more shame on each and every one of us if we don't reach out and seize it. So I've tried to address the big questions that might have been on your mind today. And I hope that I have set the tone for the conversation as this festival gets underway. It has been an honor and a privilege to stand before you and give you some of my thoughts about talent, this industry, and these new platforms. And I want to leave you with the words of a man as good as any to address the nexus of commerce and art, Mr. Orson Welles, who once said, "I hate television. I hate it as much as peanuts. But I just can't stop eating peanuts." Thank you.